Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. Welcome to today's Heritage Crime webinar, hosted by National Historic Ships UK in collaboration with the Maritime Heritage Trust. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Hannah Cunliffe. I'm Director of National Historic Ships UK, and I'll be your host for this session today. It's great to see so many of you joining, and I think we've still got people coming in as I do the welcome now. It's obviously a really important topic, and we are, I understand, the inaugural event for Heritage Crime Week. So yeah, delighted to be hosting this session today. In recent years, we've seen a number of incidents impacting the safety of historic vessels and their maritime infrastructure. These range from minor acts of vandalism and break-ins to arson attacks, which of course can be catastrophic, such as the terrible fire in 2023 at the Grade 2 listed Underfall Yard in Bristol, where I think 6 boats were destroyed, as well as many sheds and workshops. So to protect our heritage, it's vital that we take a proactive approach to this type of crime, understand the risks, and that we know how to safeguard assets in our care, as well as how to report incidents that happen in a way that reflects the significance of the damage that's been done. And so I'm delighted to be welcoming two guest speakers today with expert knowledge in this field, Paul Jeffery and Mark Harrison. Paul is chair of the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists Heritage Crime Special Interest Group, and he's worked in the heritage sector for over 30 years. He leads the listing projects and marine teams at Historic England, helping developing training and support to police forces and the Maritime and Coastguard Agency. He's a heritage crime advisor and he's taken part in a number of investigations. And Paul is also a member of our own Council of Experts at National Historic Ships since 2021. Mark is the head of heritage crime strategy at Historic England. He's a well-known figure in the field of heritage crime prevention and investigation, having begun his career in the police force and then gone on to help develop the Heritage Crime Programme in collaboration with the National Police Chiefs Council, Crown Prosecution Service, and a range of law enforcement and heritage organisations. Now, before I hand over to Paul and Mark, I was just going to outline how today's session will run. I think most of you will have already received some house rules when you were sent the link to sign in. But just to recap, you're welcome to put cameras on if you wish, and if you are asking a question towards the end of the session, we would ask that you mute yourself to avoid any disturbance to the speakers. We will be starting with a presentation from Paul and Mark, and they're keen to make this as interactive as possible. So please do post any comments or thoughts that occur to you as we go along into the chat, and we'll try to pick these up. I believe they will also have some questions for you in the audience, so look out for those and respond as well on the chat as we go along. Towards the end of their presentation, we will then have a general discussion. We're aiming for about 45 minutes for this at the end of the session and a Q&A. This is then the opportunity for you to raise any specific examples or queries that you may have relating to your own areas and experience. And at that point, I'll ask you to use the raised hand function if you'd like to speak, as well as the chat, so that you can take part in that section of the event. So we are recording the webinar. We will be circulating the link afterwards if you want to watch it again or to share it with anyone who was unable to attend today. And also, depending on the demand, it's possible that we may run some further sessions focusing on specific aspects of heritage crime. So if you enjoy today, that's something that we'll be asking your feedback on after the session ends. But without further ado, it's now time for me to hand you over into the capable hands of Mark and Paul. And I think starting with Paul, if you want to go ahead and share the screen now to kick us off. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Hannah. I'm just sharing the screen now, so if you can let me know when it appears and if it is the full slide.
Yeah, that's great, Paul. We can see that.
Oops, lovely.
Go ahead.
Lovely, thanks. There we go. Right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. as Hannah said, this is the beginning of Heritage Crime and Antisocial Behaviour Week. And I think it's really timely that we're here thinking about the impact on the historic vessel sector. What Mark and I are going to do today is to share with you a number of slides and case studies, some background information about what's happened so far with heritage crime development in England particularly, but we'll talk about the rest of the UK. And from the experience of the built heritage sector and the historic wreck dive community, look at some of the types of partnership options, some of the resources, and also how the police are structured to help think about how you might fit your vessel into that context and how we might build more resilience, more preparedness, more awareness, and help you to protect what are clearly very important heritage assets that have some specific vulnerabilities in their own right. So we'll hopefully cover all of that off in the presentation. It'll be a bit of a gallop through because lots has been happening since 2011, and we have Mark to blame for that primarily. So I won't take responsibility for that. But anyway, moving on. We just see the slides seem to be timing through, don't they? Right, apologies. Right, so I'll just start flicking through. So the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists set up 2 years ago a heritage crime special interest group because we were aware that within the heritage sector, there wasn't a lot of awareness about heritage crime, and the partnerships with police were patchy. So this has been developed to try and help that situation. I work for Historic England, as was said by Hannah, with Mark. And Mark, would you like to sort of say a little bit more about your background and role in this? For some
Might be an
reason,
idea for Lewis to turn the
yeah, for some
timing
reason
off.
the slides are toggling. I don't know why that is because they're not set for that. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, do you want to go ahead, Mark?
Am I describing what I do?
Yeah, just a little bit
Okay.
about what you do.
So as Hannah said, my background is in policing, but it's also in archaeology. I live on the North Kent coast in Kent, where for over 30 years I've been working with professional and amateur archaeologists to understand the heritage potential for the intertidal zone, which has actually led to the discovery of two unrecorded wrecks, the Sea Salter Old Brig and the aptly named Tankerton Beach wreck. Brig comes in at 1720, scheduled because she's old and because she's a smuggler's vessel. And the Tankerton wreck has been dated around about 1531, some sort of cargo vessel, about 150 tons. And she's scheduled because she's incredibly rare and contemporaneous with the Mary Rose. So my background in policing was always to get heritage and the historic environment into core policing activity. We achieved this in Kent in 2005, working with local and national partners. So when the opportunity came along to be the policing advisor to, as we were back then, English Heritage, actually I thought it was a prank originally, but here we are today, 14 years later, heritage crime officers in every single police service, not just in England, but the UK. And that's really what we're going to focus on today.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. And what we're going to do now is just go through some of the specific legislation and some of for the built environment before we move on a little bit further. But what I would like you to do in the chat, and this is something we'll come back to later. So this isn't, you're not going to be tested on this.
Yeah,
But
they are.
with the exclusion, because I know there are some police officers who we're very pleased to have with us and some heritage advisors as well in the audience. So they will know the answer to this question. So don't put it in the box. If you know the answer, don't put it in the box. But for those of you who are new to this, who've come along to find out what it's about. Could you just put in a sentence, without Googling it again, just what you think heritage crime is defined as, or what might be defined as, and we'll come back to that a little bit later on. So it'll just give you something that you can set whether or not you've learned anything today against, by putting in the chat there what you think heritage crime might be. So looking at the built environment and the marine environment, in terms of specific legislation, there are a number of acts of parliament. Now, we're not going to go into all of those in great depth today, but you'll all no doubt be aware of the term listed building, which we'll look at a little bit more. And many of you may operate in or alongside listed buildings, or maybe the owners or managers of them. There are also scheduled monuments, which tend more to be archaeological sites. And then there are protected wrecks and other things like parks and gardens and battlefields. Now, the parks and gardens and battlefields are non-statutory in terms of they don't have specific protection, but they are statutorily recognised on a register. So they're a little bit like the registers that we have for National Historic Ships UK and for heritage vessels. There are no specific legislation for those ones, but they are recognised by being on those national registers as being nationally important heritage assets. And we'll come back to that a little bit more later. But what you'll see there, the bottom one is the Lady Alice Kenlis, which is, as many of you will know, a forerunner by the same architect, marine architect, as the cut
Slide hasn't moved, Paul.
Oh, hasn't it?
No.
Which slide are we on?
Oh, sorry. Yes, on. Yep.
Right. Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah. And that is scheduled. So that does have specific additional protection. But the fact that historic vessels don't have at present specific legislation protecting them isn't a problem in many ways. So we'll look at that in a moment. So the majority of these buildings and places are owned and managed by people in the community. So they're privately owned. National Trust, obviously, English Heritage, others own lots of historic buildings, but the majority are in private ownership. Also, you might be surprised at the range of things that are protected. So yes, there are palaces, but there are also pigsties. There are rocket test bases, roller coasters. You name it, they can be protected. There are also 8 sea forks off the coast, and there are 57 protected wrecks under the Protection of Wrecks Act, but there are also about the same number which are scheduled. Heritage is all around us, and you can have a listed building. Most people live within a mile within England of a listed building. So Mark, perhaps you'd like to talk through how people can find out. This is quite annoying. I don't know why it's flicking. But anyway.
Can you switch it off, Lewis?
I'm not sure if it's under my control, but if you'd like, I can try and share the screen on my end.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, whilst we're waiting for that, Paul, we've got a few answers in the chat box. We need a few more people to take part, please. So Gerard says that heritage crime is graffiti, vandalism and theft. Jay Morgan, theft and or damage of heritage sites and collections. Kathleen tells us taking without permission anything of historic value on land or sea, known or unknown. I like that. Heritage value. Pamela, damage to heritage property. Derek, theft and or destruction. Harry Farmer, morning Harry. The depletion or destruction of heritage significance through illegal behaviours or unlicensed acts. He's been hanging around with me too much. And then we've got Ruth, theft, vandalism, criminal damage, damage by developers, loss of buildings and artifacts. So, yeah, a really good cross-section there, Paul.
Excellent. Okay, so Lewis, you've taken over. Hopefully that won't be on there. I don't know why that's, apologies, everybody. It's I checked mine. It's not transitioning on mine, so I don't know why it was doing that. It must be the link. So, yeah, Mark, would you like to show people just quickly how they might find things on the National Heritage List for England and what the different elements on there are?
So this is where I always say to Paul, how do we actually count this? And there's always two numbers, in like 400,000 sites or 500,000 sites. But whatever the number is, they are now all hosted online on the National Heritage List for England. It's open source. Two ways of searching. You can search in the left-hand box, which is sort of a more text-based search, but the one I prefer is the one that says explore the map. Next slide, please. And I've just put in the Avebury area around the Stonehenge landscape just to show you that something that has nearly every type of asset. So the blue place markers are listed buildings. The red hatched areas are scheduled monuments. The brown area on the bottom left is a battlefield. The green areas are parks and gardens, and the orange area shows the UNESCO World Heritage designation. So what's that figure, Paul? You're never more than a mile from a protected site.
That's correct, yeah.
In England. So once you click on one of those objects, it will open up a more detailed box and give you what we call the full list entry. Next slide, please. Over to you, Paul.
Lovely, thank you very much. So we're now going to look at, very quickly, a couple of examples of heritage harbours. So most of you will no doubt be aware of the Heritage Harbours scheme. It's developing rapidly. Lots of new harbours are coming on board, and it's a really good way of bringing together traditional land-based heritage and heritage managers and the maritime vessel sector to help develop joint benefits, to increase tourism, to help inform planning decisions to make sure that things like flats don't get built across slipways and make it impossible to continue to utilize some of these important places. So it's a really useful scheme. It's also a really good opportunity for us to look at potential things like heritage watch schemes, specifically around those places using those partners that already exist. But we'll be talking a little bit more about that later. But thinking back to the slides that Mark just showed us, we're now going to just look at a few examples to see how many protected places there are around or within these locations. Because these can help to become the anchors to other resources in relation to prevention of any harm that might happen to your vessels. Can I have the next slide, please? So there you'll see on the left a slightly aerial view of Stourport-on-Severn, and on the right you'll see the NHLE map depicting the number of listed buildings in and around that area. So lots of potential partners. Some of those will be businesses, some of them will be domestic properties in personal use, some will be owned by trusts, but there is already a good network of people there who have an interest in protecting historic places. Yeah. So a heritage watch scheme that draws that together with looking after the historic vessels has real potential in a place like that. And of course, Stourport is a Georgian canal basin with lots of current and also future potential, as well as its historic importance. Can we have the next slide, please? Exeter in Devon, again, you'll see on the left the view, and you'll see on the right the map. And interestingly, you'll see just in the top left corner of that map, there's the red line, and that's the Roman city wall. So that's the scheduling of the Roman city wall. So you've not just got historic buildings there, you've got archaeological sites which also have protection. So you've got in that location, literally within a couple of minutes walk, more than 3,000 years of history going on in that one place, and that history continuing today. And so again, opportunities to pull all of that together, to pull all of those partners together is really important. Next slide, please.
Paul, on
Yep.
that, just before we go, can you go back one slide? Just on that point, was the sea level high enough in the Roman period for them to be bringing vessels in up to the wall?
So yes, in the Roman period, not quite up to the wall, but there is evidence of a series of former docks and berthing areas within that area down below the Roman fortress. Yeah.
Thank you. And I know on the call we've got Sergeant Jules Fry from Devon and Cornwall Police today.
Yes, indeed. Yes, yeah. And we'll be talking to Jules later about some of the initiatives that they have in Devon and Cornwall, which is a force that's really got some exciting things happening at the moment. So yeah, moving on to the next slide, please. Wales next to sea, Norfolk, a very different type of setup. But again, you'll see a range of historic buildings as well as the vessels. And again, the potential to utilize that, although you're in a more linear rather than concentrated and focused layout there. And every place is unique. Every place will have its own challenges and opportunities, both in terms of partners, but in terms of its layout as well. So thinking about what the challenges are in that place, and we'll come back to this, and how you can best address and minimize those is a very unique thing. But there are principles and there are approaches which can be applied to help identify that. Moving on to the next one. Faversham in Kent, I'll hand this one over to you because this is in your patch of the woods, Mark.
Well, if I'd known Harry Farmer was going to be on the call today from MOLA, Museum of London Archaeology, Harry and Grace are working on a great new project called Coast in Mind, and I know they've spent the last couple of weeks in Faversham. Am I allowed to bring Harry in if he's willing?
Yes, certainly.
You there, Harry? He's gone for his lunch. Anyway, this one's just down the road from me. It's a tidal creek, Faversham Creek. It's got hundreds of years of maritime history, and if you look at along the side there, lots of listed buildings, and it's a very active area for smacks and barges. And if we actually go a little bit further inland, Paul, one of the tributaries of this creek was where they found what became known as the Graveney boat in 1970, which turned out to be an early medieval cargo vessel.
Absolutely. Okay, next slide, please. Malden in Essex, again, you'll see on the tidal estuary there, as you can see again, a real concentration of historic buildings in the area. So lots of potential again for that partnership. But a very different layout and design and some very different challenges, both climatic, environmental, and from potential crime.
And I notice on there, Paul, there's a battlefield in the bottom left-hand corner.
There is indeed, yes, the Battle of Malden. So again, interestingly, battlefields, as I mentioned before, whilst they are nationally recognised, don't have specific protections, unlike listed buildings and scheduled monuments. So they're very much like vessels on the national registers. But that doesn't mean that there aren't ways that we can help to protect them and that there aren't potential offences and heritage crime implications in activity that impacts them. And we'll come on to that a bit.
So is this the English versus the Vikings?
Yes, that's yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
991, I believe it was.
Yeah, I believe so. It's that period. Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, a well-established area which has had human activity and maritime activity going on for well over 1,000 years. Okay, next slide, please.
Wow.
As you'll know, currently more than 1,500 vessels on the registers. What we see there, obviously, in the forefront is a high-speed RAF offshore rescue vessel. And again, these types of vessels have specific vulnerabilities. Obviously, with any of these heritage sites, the thing that they have in common is that unlike a modern car or a piece of property which can be replaced, you can't just go if something is stolen or something is damaged or destroyed through arson. You can't just go and replace it by buying something off the shelf. So even with insurance that might help to repair, once key heritage is lost, then it is often irreplaceable. So even more important that we value and look after these important vessels and support the work of those of you who do that by minimizing any additional challenges that you have. And there are enough challenges in fundraising, in maintaining, in getting spare parts, in finding specialist skills to undertake work without having to worry additionally about preventable criminal activity or doubt harm.
On that point, Paul, it was put to me the other day that with the advent of 3D printing, that pretty much we could make any spare parts we wanted to. And I think we've got Sarah on from Underfall. And one of the things that struck me about that dreadful fire was not just the loss of the workshops and the vessels, but also the tools, the shipwrights tools that have been passed down through the ages that have been lost. Yeah, we can probably make copies of those, but they're not the ones that have been in the hands of shipwrights for, hundreds of years.
That's right. And anyone who uses specialist tools, obviously, in the audience will know that, like an archaeologist's trowel, stonemasons, chisels and so on, they become very much worn and adapted to the user and become very personal. So it's, again, very difficult to replace with something new and then use it in exactly the same way. Next slide, please. And Mark, again, canals, obviously, inland waterways, very important historically. The forerunners in mass transport before the railways really started to move goods inland over considerable distances. Also lots of recreational opportunities, but they do attract some pretty strange antisocial behaviour and crime, and can be quite vulnerable to attack, can't they?
Yes, they are. And I know we've got colleagues on from the Canal and Rivers Trust today. When we trained them up in Leeds a few years ago, they gave us a figure which was over 3,000 miles of managed waterways, which anyone can CCT can confirm that. But what that means, Paul, is our rivers and waterways are cutting through nearly every single community, and built at a time when maybe heritage protection wasn't the first thing on developers' minds.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, again, as you say, with that extended estate, lots of it does run through built up areas, which has its own problems, so urban areas, but lots of it is rural with very few people living nearby. And of course, vessels on that network are sadly vulnerable to mindless vandalism and attack, as well as, again, the potential for theft and other criminality.
But it does give us an opportunity with people that are either working on the canal, either on the water or beside the water, or people maybe renting vessels for their holidays, giving them the information and the confidence that if they see something out of the ordinary, call it in. It's okay to call it in. So we are developing systems and processes to do that.
Absolutely. And that's something we'll come back to a little bit later. And at the end, discussing with you on the call what would be most useful to you in terms of adapting that guidance, both for assessment and for calling to your specific situations is a really important part of this, because this is the solution to this isn't something that can be delivered to you. It's something that you can help to deliver in partnership with others, and that's the key to this. It does require people being proactive for themselves and for those in their community, whatever that community is.
Yeah.
Excellent. Next slide, please. And here, of course, again, we can see lots of vessels, unfortunately, continue to be at risk. Many of them become hulks or sink. Many of them are beyond repair in the same way as there are lots of buildings that are historic that just don't have a sustainable or viable use and sadly end up on the Heritage at Risk register. And it's very difficult, given the large number, to protect them all. So again, as you'll know through a National Historic Ship, sometimes recording is the best solution. And of course, where harm occurs, whether that's through neglect, whether that's through natural processes, or whether it's through crime, being able to utilize that recording and dismantling guidance is really important as part of maintaining a record where it's impossible to retain the vessel itself going forward. So that's a really important tie-in here again. So this is very much about drawing on what's already available, drawing on partnerships that are out there, and looking at specifically what needs to be tweaked or added to create that resilience and that understanding of what the threats are and how they might best be mitigated. Next slide, please. And of course, as Mark just said, it's about the tools and the people. Heritage, yes, it's vessels, it's places, but those are only important because of the stories and the meaning that they give to people and groups in society. Without those stories, they are inanimate objects, but with those stories, they come to life. And so things like the ship-shaped networks provide that opportunity to maintain them through the skills. They provide the opportunity to draw those stories together. But there's also a lot of potential for those to be the places that help to identify and improve the way that we value, the way that we help other people to understand their value and protect these places. Because I think quite often, and many of you on the call, and hopefully we'll talk about this later, will probably recognize this, but you may well have a vessel that's in a slightly neglected or out of reach location. You're working on it, but to members of the public wandering past, they just see it as an abandoned vessel. You're putting a lot of time and effort into it, but actually urban explorers or others could just see it as somewhere to light a fire or sort of camp out or whatever. So understanding, helping people to realize the significance of these places and vessels at points in time is a really good prevention, because a lot of harm is caused through misunderstanding or foolishness. Only a smaller proportion is deliberate, either criminality or reckless vandalism. And I think that's an important point, isn't it, Mark? Because this is all about trying to prevent things through education before they happen.
Yeah, our primary objective will always be prevention, whether that's through community engagement, education programs, or, and I know we've got Stephen Armstrong-Smith on the call, sort of the more traditional locks and bolts and alarms and things, but bringing those all together makes it a lot, very powerful, because at the end of the day, the criminals are the minority group. The majority are good, decent people that want to protect our past.
Thanks, Mark. Moving on to the next slide, and this is another one for you, because I know it's not a heritage harbour at the moment, but Whitstable and the vessels of the base there, again, has all of the opportunities, but also all of the challenges that all heritage harbours, or historic harbours, should we say, to cover more broadly those that haven't joined the scheme yet, encounter.
Yeah, so the Whitstable Harbour was opened in 1832. I always get this back to front. It was either the world's first harbour serviced by a railway or the first one in Britain, but whatever it is, it's important. The Canterbury and Whitstable Railway opened for business in 1825, and the bill to make that railway a thing was actually signed last month, this month, 200 years ago. So it does form part of Railway 200, and the harbour will go on to be part of that process as we go on. My friend Richard Judge and his wife Sue have bought the Chieftain and brought her back to life, and I've had the pleasure to go out on the vessel a number of times, and he takes people out that would have had no opportunity to see Whitstable Bay and the East Swale, and get stories told to them on their journeys. So really, really good. And I know he's bringing in lots and lots of business into the harbour, Paul.
Excellent. Yeah. And if we go to the next slide as well, just to show, so again, the sort of variation of different vessels. So again, the Gamecock, who are working really hard to try and restore and find a sustainable future that has benefits to the wider community, as many of the other vessel owners have already done or are in the process of doing.
So I'd known the Gamecock since I was a child. She was moored in Whitstable Bay. So this is about the 1960s. And she'd been built in Whitstable in 1906. She also had a motor fitted to her a few years later. So she was actively working for many, many years. And I then became very aware of her when she was being raced by Bill Coleman, an oyster dredger himself. Unfortunately, Bill died a little while ago, but hopefully his skills are being passed on to the new shipwrights.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, next slide, please. And then if we just go straight on, the next bit we're going to race through a bit. So it's just looking at some existing partnerships and prevention for some other areas that we might look at as potential examples. So the Protected Wreck Association, which is an association of people involved with protected wrecks under the legislation, so their licensees and their dive teams, who are volunteers who are the backbone, over 200 of them in the dive teams in total. They're the backbone of protecting wrecks, monitoring them, recording change to them, helping with survey, identifying potential concerns. And what happened there was that the Protected Wrecks Association, working with Historic England and our contractors, MSDS Marine, put together a site security champion scheme, which has a number of products to both carry out risk assessments and also to make sure that people are confident in reporting and calling. And they work very closely with those licensees and their teams around their wrecks, work very closely with their local police dive units, and particularly Devon and Cornwall Police, but a number of others around the coast as well. And of course, these police units, as we'll come back to, are interested in the marine heritage. They will be interested in your vessels, and we'll keep coming back to, if you haven't made contact with them before, make contact, invite them along, let them know what you're about, where you're located. They will often then, if they happen to be passing, just stop by. So you'll start to get the opportunity for random patrols at various times if they're in the area, and that can add a visual presence, which is really useful. They'll also be aware of who the owners are, so if they see activity which looks unusual or people that they don't recognise, they're more likely to challenge that. And of course, the same within the harbours. So work with the Nautical Archaeology Society, with the Protected Wrecks Association. They operate out of many of the same harbours that you do. So they're interested in historic vessels, but the ones that are under the water. You are interested in keeping others afloat. But there's a lot of shared interest there, and there's a lot of opportunity to help each other to keep your boats, your premises, and your assets safe by being aware of each other in that space. And I think that's important, isn't it, Mark? It's that being aware of others with a similar but perhaps slightly different interest.
Yeah, and it can, sometimes you can feel quite isolated. So the more people you can bring into your group to give you that confidence is really important.
And just the next slide, please. And again, if you haven't made contact with your local marine unit, or if you don't know whether you have one, then you do get in touch with us. But it's really useful. The same, and we'll keep coming back to this in relation to premises, but with your heritage crime officer that we'll talk about a bit in a moment, and your neighbourhood policing teams. Be proactive. Don't wait until something happens to contact them. Contact them now, and make sure that they're aware of what you are doing, who you are, the importance of what you have, and then they can factor that in to what they're doing in that community. It's really too late after the events happened.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. And again, the site security champions with the Protected Wrecks Association, they're keeping an eye out on the water near wrecks. So if you've got a protected wreck, and you can look that up on the NHLE, which we showed you earlier, if you've got a protected wreck near to where you operate or where your vessel is based, then get in touch with that team, because they will be out and about. They will be able to keep an eye out on you as well. And you can keep an eye out on the wreck for them. So everybody helps each other, everybody benefits. Next slide, please. And lots of developments going on at the moment. So this is in relation to wrecks, but it can be applied to other structures underwater, and there's no reason it couldn't be applied to parts of vessels that are permanently wet going forward. But Historic England, working with MSDS Marine and our colleagues in the Netherlands Heritage Agency, have developed a forensic marking product for underwater. And again, the product itself helps in prevention, but also in detection when items are stolen or messed about with, if you like, because the product is transferred to the wetsuit and or equipment of the perpetrator. It's unique to each site. And of course, signage is important, because what you need to do is to make sure that people are aware it's there to deter them. There's no point just sticking it on, then you're looking at investigation. Investigation is a part of it when necessary, but we keep coming back to this. It's about prevention. Prevention is always, as Mark said, the best cure. If we can just flick through the next slide and then on to the one after, please. Thank you. So, Mark, within Historic England, obviously we have teams who have had specific extra training from you and work with yourself and the police, and also with other partners. That's helped to start to deter and have an impact, hasn't it? So perhaps you'd like to talk through this one.
Sure. So we have regional teams up and down the country in Newcastle, York, Cambridge, London, Bristol, Manchester, and where have I forgotten, Paul?
So
Birmingham, Cambridge.
Bristol, Cambridge, yeah, York, Manchester, yeah. South East, so London, yeah.
Yeah, London. And I'm just looking worryingly at my computer. It's saying that my computer's not charging.
All right. Okay.
Let me try something else. Right, you might have to take this slide, Paul.
Yep, no problem then, Mark. Just let me know when you're back on.
Okay.
So again, obviously one of the things that you'll hear about is unlawful metal detecting on archaeological sites, and particularly through the guidance of Mark, working with local police forces and with our regional colleagues, we've had some really successful investigations which have led to a range of outcomes, from warnings through to prosecutions and imprisonment on a number of occasions, and reclamation of money through proceeds of crime. So there are ways that, with the heritage legislation that's specific to sites, but also using normal criminal charges, that we can start to bring this together and to start to have an impact. And we can build on that, obviously, with other areas of heritage. If we can just move on to the next slide, please. And again, we also have maritime teams. So we have a number of divers who can monitor sites through our contractors and work with the licensees. And we also have a number of our marine staff trained as heritage crime advisors and in identifying historic ordnance, which comes up surprisingly not just on the coast, but people will pick it up either from wrecks or elsewhere, and they will transport it across the country and stick it anywhere, whether that's in a lockup or even, as you may have seen on the news recently, people who collect these kinds of things will stick it in their garage or in their house, putting themselves and their neighbours at potential risk and causing significant problems. And that again comes back to the canals. So one of the things there, magnet fishing's been on the increase, and again, it's amazing what people have thrown in the canals over the years and what people will pick up and take home from them, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah, we've had 2 fatalities so far, not to do with the live ammunition and ordnance they brought up. They were actually under the influence of alcohol, but it is a growing pastime.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Next slide, please. So now we're just going to whistle through a few of the partnerships that already exist that you might be interested in considering joining or finding out the local partners in your area. So next slide, please. Mark, perhaps you'd like to give us a sort of very thumbnail background to the origins of Arch and what it is.
So Arch is the Alliance to Reduce Crime Against Heritage. It was almost the first thing that we set up when I was asked to look at specifically illicit metal detecting, sometimes known as night hawking. So that was the first piece of work we had to do. But as we went on into years 1 and 2, it became quite clear how many heritage organisations, non-heritage organisations wanted to get involved to help us protect the historic and the natural environment. So there are now about 200 organisations in Arch, and that gives us a wide range of potential, Paul. You know, it brings people, it brings expertise, it brings volunteer base. Sometimes it comes with resources like money, and sometimes additional powers.
Indeed, yeah. Excellent. Okay, so Mark, the next 5 or 6 slides, again, over to you on the structure and police leadership, just to give people a kind of a context. So next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah.
Thank you. So on a daily basis, I don't deal with them all the time, but I can, over a period of year, deal with all 46 police services in England and Wales. So those are the Home Office forces. So you have the county forces that you will work with, plus specialist units like Transport, Ministry of Defence and Civil Nuclear. And we also work very closely with Police Scotland and the Department of Rural Affairs and the PSNI in Northern Ireland. So this is very much a UK-wide project now, Paul. Next one. And in order for me to get things done, rather than deal with 46 chief constables, I deal with 1 deputy chief constable, and this is Rachel Nolan. She's the deputy chief in Essex, and she's been the heritage crime lead for 5 years, and she's also the lead for police support volunteers across the country. And if we have an issue, she can then pass that out to all forces. And on the call, we've got Sergeant Jules Fry, and he was appointed as the operational lead to work with me and Rachel on sort of marine and maritime issues. Next one.
Excellent. Yep, next one.
And because we work with the police and other enforcement bodies, they work to a business planning process known as the National Intelligence Model. So every couple of years, we do an assessment to identify those active or those emerging threats, so we know where to focus our resource. And I've got to be honest with you, Paul, apart from cybercrime, these ones that delegates can see on the screen are relatively stable. They do move position now and again. So, for example, 5 years ago, the theft of metal, particularly that theft of lead from churches, would have been at the top, and it was stubbornly at the top. But now it's moved on to arson and antisocial behaviour and the theft of stone.
Yeah, and while we're on that, Mark, you mentioned cybercrime there. I think it's really important for people to be aware, isn't it? Because it's something that, particularly if you're a small charity or if you're a group looking after something, you don't necessarily think about. But of course, we've seen with the British Library and with a number of other organisations, the vulnerability of digital archives and
Yeah.
the threat through both criminal activity in an attempt to obtain money, and also more sinister from other states or terrorist organizations.
Yeah, very much so. So this is a very specialist area. If delegates want to have a special input on that, we can find the experts to do that.
Brilliant. But again, it's being aware of the whole. And interestingly, I don't know about people on this call, but many organisations, local authorities as well, have been over the last few years starting to get rid of hard copy records because they're trying to reduce the storage space, and they thought that digital was safe for the future. But even quite sophisticated digital archives with multiple backups can be vulnerable. So it's just worth bearing in mind before making any decisions to have a think about that and look at the potential and what your risks might be. And
The other side to cyber, Paul, is criminals actually using systems and databases to plan and coordinate their attacks. And by this, I mean physical attacks. So there is some evidence to say that the organised crime groups were using online aerial systems like Google Earth to plan stealing lead from churches. So again, raising an awareness to people.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark. And yeah, continuing with you. Next slide, if we can flick through and on to the next one, Louis,
Yeah.
please. Brilliant.
So with fire and rescue and arson coming up as being a very high active and emerging threat on the assessment, today is going to be the hottest the hottest day of Wimbledon, I think, one of the hottest ever days in British history. The land is drying out. Timber frame buildings, thatch, very, very vulnerable. Landscape areas, not just being subject to heritage damage, but species and flora and fauna damage. And in many cases, Paul, these are deliberately set fires. And we know, obviously, in Underfall, that was a deliberately set fire. And I did see on the delegates list, we had a colleague from Hartlepool, Joanna from Hartlepool Council. Don't know if you're there.
I think she's had to leave to catch a train, but I
Okey
was
doke.
from Hartlepool.
Okay. Last year we had, over the last 18 months, we had 15 heritage-related fires in that part of Cleveland. So we were delighted when the National Fire Chiefs Council actually listened to what we said, and they've now integrated heritage and the historic environment into their national arson reduction strategy.
Excellent. Thank you. And
Tim-
next slide.
Is it me again?
It is you. You've got a little way to go yet, Mark.
Okie dokie. So in terms of those offences that relate to a person or individuals that have no association with the heritage site, then in general terms, those investigations are undertaken by the police. We have a formal memorandum of understanding that says who needs to work with who, and those prosecutions are coordinated by the Crown Prosecution Service.
Excellent.
Next slide, please. And here is a copy of the MOU. It's not a contract, it's not a service level agreement, it's an agreement to work collaboratively to bring people to account. It means if there is an issue between one or more of the partners, we actually talk about it, make sure it doesn't happen in the future. And in 2023, Paul, we added Welsh Government and Cadw, our sister heritage agency, to the document. And we also extended the definition of heritage crime to include those behaviours that are classified by the Home Office as antisocial behaviour.
Excellent, thank you. And the next few sort of sections are just really for awareness. We need to kind of keep moving. So if you could just give us a quick summary over these. Yeah.
Yep. So policing now has a political element to it. 2013 saw the introduction of police and crime commissioners. They oversee the budgets and the strategy and hold the chief constable in their local area to account. They publish police and crime plans. We try and integrate heritage into their plans. And we've got more government reorganisation coming up where the regional mayors will take on this function, Paul.
Excellent. And next slide, please. And yeah.
Yeah, and obviously we're a branch of government. We're an arm's length body funded almost entirely by the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. So part of what we do is to help government deliver on their manifesto proposals, and we sit within milestone 5, which is safer streets.
Excellent, thank you. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So obviously here, these are the kind of main threats to historic places, climate change, development pressures, and all of these apply to ports, harbours, and the kind of places where your vessels will be. And then obviously for today, crime and antisocial behaviour. And these are the kind of two main areas, aren't they? The main umbrellas, Mark. There's that deliberate criminality, and then there's that antisocial behaviour, which can lead to quite significant harm.
Yeah, and when people say to me, it's just nuisance, it's neighbours, etc., I say to them, it's about 80% of our workload. These types of crime are perennial, they're persistent, and they are highly pervasive if you don't get a grip. And they can, if you don't grip it, lead to serious loss and damage and impact on well-being of those communities affected.
Absolutely. And I think this is key. We talk in the built heritage environment very much about place, because people do value the places around them. If you ask them what's in their sort of top 3 local concerns, they're unlikely to say heritage, but they are likely to say antisocial behaviour. And if you ask them for examples, it'll nearly always be in relation to a heritage property, the church or the war memorial.
Off-roading.
Exactly, yeah.
Graffiti.
So it's all of these things that matter to people. Right, so moving on, you'll remember that you put your definition of heritage crime in earlier. So Mark, perhaps you'd like to let them know how accurate they were.
Well, I think between them, they probably got the entire definition. So next slide, please. So to take account of changing legislation, it's any offence. So it takes account of existing and any future legislation that will come in. And where we talk about harm, it's not just the financial value, it's the heritage value, which you can't measure monetarily. Then we talk about assets, and Paul's run through some of those. And setting's really important, because if you're trying to understand what's going on in a local area, sometimes it's not the asset itself that's under attack initially, but if you can understand the area within 500-600 meters, you might think, okay, we need to do something here because this could lead to serious loss or damage to the asset. And as Paul has been highlighting all the way through, we are the temporary guardians of these sites. We need to leave them in better, or as good as, or better condition for the future. And Paul, the definition now includes cultural property. So Andy Bliss, when he was the National Police Chiefs Council lead, he very much brought in the museum sector, arts, auction houses, etc. So a very strong partnership now.
Absolutely. And of course, that's a really important point there, the museums, because not just museums, but again, obviously historic vessel operators quite often, as well as the tools that we've already talked about, will have other artifacts and items related to the history. So those are collections which are potentially vulnerable. And of course, we've seen theft of historic items from churches. It's not just attacks on the fabric of buildings or vessels, but it's their contents as well that can be vulnerable.
Are we going to have time to let people have a go at this, Paul, or do we need to run through it?
I think we need to run through, to be honest, Mark. Yeah. So
Okay.
Next slide, please. Yeah. So again, there are some examples there of different types of heritage crime. You'll see all the kind of things that we've been talking about so far. Mark, perhaps you'd just like to very quickly go through each of them and what the impact is.
Sure. So on top left, we've got the church that's lost its lead roof covering. It rained and rained and rained. The church wasn't in use, so by the time the church community came in, all the water had gone through the slats and written off the organ, prayer mats, hymn books, electrics, plasterwork. Next one is the National Memorial to Sailors and Marines down in Hampshire, where the thieves stole the bronze plaques with all the dead sailors and Marines' names on. Fortunately, we've recovered those and arrested the offenders. The cannon relates to a series of cannons that were brought to the service by a professional diver who made fraudulent reports about where they came from. Paul, they actually came from a Stuart period vessel in the Thames Estuary, I think.
That's right. Yeah, the protected wreck, the London, although at that point it wasn't protected, but nonetheless it was owned by the MOD, historic vessel, sovereign immune, and as you say, fraudulently declared. Yeah.
But a great piece of detective work actually pinned them down to the London, and he was convicted 2 years in jail and a £51,000 proceeds of crime order. Top right, the thieves posing as highways engineers stole a Georgian pavement in its entirety. Bottom left, Paul, you've already mentioned roller coasters. This is the world's oldest roller coaster, the Scenic Railway at Dreamland in Margate, which had been restored by volunteers. The day before it was due to reopen, someone set fire to it deliberately. I was actually the incident commander for that one. Delighted to say that it is up and running again now. The post box is there to show people that what could happen. So in terms of post boxes, particularly if they are of a certain age and vintage, this one is Victorian, but anything that's unusual, Edward VIII, Edward VII, airmail boxes, not only do they have an intrinsic cultural value to collectors, the thieves also get a double hit from what's inside the box. In the past, it used to be money, cash, maybe credit cards, but these days it's about people's identities. Next one shows some Bronze Age spearheads where a metal detectorist sought permission but was refused, and he came back later on and found what we call a hoard, so an assemblage of bronze objects. swords, daggers, ingots, axe heads, and cheekily he then took some of the objects in to claim a treasure award. I had a look at it and thought, where's the good stuff? And the magistrates very kindly gave us a warrant and we found the rest of the stuff. And the last one is these very iconic cattle troughs that started to appear on our road networks back in the 1860s. They're not used anymore, but volunteers used them as planters to make their local area look cared for. And we had 8 of these lifted, again, people posing as highways engineers. They weigh nearly 2 metric tons. They're solid granite. They're carved from, solid granite. We did recover 2. We do have a person in custody. We think we can show he's controlled more of them. But what's the market for those, Paul? Who is going to buy a cattle trough?
Yeah, and again, it's the effort that is often required. These people, they'll dress up, look like council workmen, often in plain sight. Some of these thefts, very audacious, and people just assume that they must be there for a reason.
But really, people checking provenance and due diligence, if that's been offered for sale, surely questions need to be asked.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to run through very quickly now the key operation names. Each of these, as Mark mentioned already, Operation Birdie and Sergeant Fry from Devon and Cornwall Police leading on that, but each of these has a police lead. So just to be aware. So if we can go to the next slide, please, and the next one. And of course, we have on the call some people from Underfall Yard, and that really brings together exactly what we're here for today. You've got historic buildings, built heritage, you've got historic vessels, you've got people's livelihoods, people's businesses, historic vessels being maintained and repaired. You've got good developing relationships with the community, sustainable business opportunities, and all of it, overnight, literally livelihoods destroyed. And thankfully, but only through luck, nobody was seriously hurt or killed, because that could have happened.
Yeah.
And that demonstrates the seriousness of some of this. The heritage is important, but at the end of the day, a lot of these actions have the potential to harm people, which is even more worrying.
Yeah. Somebody could have lost their life or been seriously injured here, Paul. And it was certainly Underfall and the fire at Crooked House in Staffordshire and the Dalton Mill, which most people know as Peaky Blinders HQ in Keighley in West Yorkshire, that really pushed us on to negotiate that partnership with the National Fire Chiefs Council.
Yeah. Okay, moving on, next slide, please. And again, that just demonstrates there are listed buildings, obviously, as was mentioned earlier, significant damage to nationally important buildings as well as nationally important vessels in that instance. Next 2 slides, just a quick flick through, but demonstrating again the public value that's put on these, and thankfully we might hear a bit more about that in our discussion in a moment, but a real bounce back despite that harm, and very difficult for people, but the community again demonstrating that it does value these heritage assets. Next slide, please. Operation Crucible is theft of heritage metals. If we can just move on. So Mark, a very upsetting story on this one, isn't it? Although the damage looks relatively limited.
Yes, this is Plemstall, St. Peter and St. Paul's in Plemstall in Cheshire. It was the zinc water management gully was stolen during that weekend of the Olympics, where it just rained and rained and rained, and the church isn't used very often. So when the vicar came in to plan for a wedding, the church was unusable. So that wedding had to be cancelled. What the crime report didn't say, Paul, was that the bride was blind and that she'd chosen this church because she'd attended the church since she was a child. So getting across to politicians, it's not just, as they classify it, theft, non-residential.
Absolutely. Yeah. Next slide, please. And again, the next one. So again, we've already seen sort of examples of paving stones being uprooted from the roadside. But again, taking headstones, these are marked headstones. What the market for that is, as you've said before, Mark, very hard to guess.
Yeah.
But people will literally steal anything. On to the next slide, please.
And that was the Brontes chapel. So the Bronte
Yes.
family was the chapel and the graveyard associated with their chapel.
Next slide, please. So yeah, off-road driving. We're just going to whack through these because they're just to give you an idea, but that can cause harm to archaeological sites. It can cause untold damage. Archaeological sites are vulnerable to changes in their water level, changes in the levels of chemicals within them, and so having things sort of cut through them as well. And you can see there the kind of damage that can be done by not just motorcycles and four-wheel drive vehicles, but mountain bikes as well. Okay, next slide, please. And of course, this is one that vessels can suffer from as well as historic buildings.
Yeah, and canals.
And canal infrastructure. Again, graffiti. The problem is that it might look harmless, and sometimes people use ingredients that they say are natural. But of course, lots of this stone and of course wood as well are quite porous materials, aren't they, Mark? And so cleaning them can cause quite a lot of damage too.
Yeah, and we're seeing quite a lot of that being used where heritage is the backdrop to a political campaign recently.
Yeah. Okay, and if we flick through past the next two slides, because we've already talked about Operation Birdie, and on to the next one. So again, crime and antisocial behaviour, and of course that antisocial behaviour can lead to some of these significant other crimes like arson and graffiti, but a lot of it is just low-level damage, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah, but it's, as I said earlier on, it's about 80% of our work. And I think for politicians, it can be easy sometimes to say it's low-level nuisance. Well, the way I would look at it, everybody, is most people are not affected by serious and organised crime. Most people. But lots of people are affected by antisocial behaviour.
Yeah.
And so it is pervasive and it needs to be dealt with. And of course, we're at the start of Antisocial Behaviour and Heritage Crime Week today.
Absolutely. Okay, so the next one, waste crime, if we can go 2 slides forward, that's it. Next one, yeah. And of course, dumping material on historic archaeological sites can put chemicals and harm into the soil, but of course, things like that and tyres can be set fire or catch fire in the dry weather, as Mark's already said, and that can then bake the ground and that can destroy the archaeology too. Okay, I'm going to race through a few quick slides now because I want to get us to looking at the kind of guidance and what we can do about things. So next slide, please, and next one. So just to be aware for listed buildings, you can look this up online or we can go into more detail on another occasion if you're interested. But listed buildings come in 3 grades. They're all nationally important and they're managed, and any harm or applications to them are managed through the local authority. But for grade 1 and grade 2 star, Historic England has to be consulted. Okay, next slide but one, please. So scheduled monuments, the archaeology we've talked about, a whole range of things. They're not all ancient. Things like Kit's Coty House burial chamber there, which would originally have had an earth mound, prehistoric, Roman fortress at Richborough, but also relatively recent. So Second World War, like these sound mirrors, but also Cold War sites and industrial sites can also be protected through that means. Next slide, please. Mark mentioned it earlier, but the Tankerton Beach wrecks. So wrecks can be protected through the Protection of Wrecks Act if they're permanently underwater. That includes the ability to exclude access. So if it's on the intertidal zone, scheduling is more appropriate because that allows people to walk over, but with their dog, but it excludes activity that would be harmful, because there's no point having a wreck that stops divers from swimming over it when the tide's in, but allows people to walk their dog over it when the tide's out. That just would seem a little bit silly. Next slide, please. This picture of a steam paddle steamer, some of you may recognise. It's a wreck off the Liverpool Bay, heading towards the North Wales coast. It was a Confederate gun runner built in Toxteth, Dalelia. Next slide, please. So sitting in that area there. And next slide. And now sitting reasonably intact on the seabed. You can see they're using LiDAR, which allows us to look through the water in a similar way to the way that, sorry, this isn't using LiDAR, it's using the same presentation as LiDAR. So LiDAR we use on land, and then this is using sonar and geophysics techniques. And you can see there, one of the paddles is still there, the other paddle missing from where it was hit while it was running in the dark by another vessel and sunk. Next slide, please. But of course, many of those wrecks have similarities in terms of their technology to some of your floating vessels. Next slide, please. And here we are again, just the locations of some of these protected wrecks, and you'll see disproportionately around the south of England, because there are more dive clubs operating, because the weather's better and the sea temperature's warmer. So there are lots of wrecks, 36,000 that we know about, although we don't know the location of all of them around the coast of England, but not all of them specifically protected. Next slide, please. And again, just the type of interference. So some of it's looking for heritage material, but some of it is just trying to obtain things like copper boilers, or sometimes even the steel for scrap. And that's become an increasing issue worldwide, as you'll have probably seen. Next slide, please. And this again, the cannon from the London. So flicking past. And Mark, yeah, perhaps you'd like to talk about this, because again, this is a kind of, this isn't a one-off. This is an industrial scale enterprise, isn't it?
Yeah, this was a collaboration between fishermen, John Bly, and a professional diver, Nigel Ingram. They teamed up to identify World War I battleships, British battleships in French waters, and the intelligence came in from the French authorities that they'd been seen. They weren't able to actually prove they were taking the predominantly copper pull from these vessels, but eventually it was all pieced together. We searched their properties and we found all the evidence, all of the books, all the receipts, where they're going to scrap yards, and they received 4 years in jail with the proceeds of crime confiscation order of £101,000.
Thanks, Mark. Next slide, please. And again, looking at some of those examples that we've seen before, so stone theft and theft from church roofs, just again, examples of prosecutions. And there again, the two divers from a First World War shipwreck. So, we are seeing an increasing number of prosecutions, which are further helping as a deterrent, aren't they, Mark? So again, we're getting back to that, trying to prevent through spreading the word.
Yeah, so by showing people that we have taken enforcement action, there's evidence to show that that does act as a deterrent. But of course, not everyone will be brought to account through the court process, and there are some very effective interventions that we use with the police, well, community resolution, cautions, things like that.
Brilliant. Next slide, please. And Mark, 3 slides here, really looking at some of the guidance that's already available, and perhaps you could mention as well, it's in the second slide, I think, the sentencing guidance, and some of the proactive use of signage, which I think is something that's underused, particularly perhaps in the historic vessel sector.
Yep. So when we started, we asked people what type of advice and guidance they would need. So we had crime prevention, helping owners and managers understand the threats and the risks and the vulnerabilities that would then lead them to putting prevention measures into place. Next one. Not so much a guide on how to do graffiti, Paul, but how to prevent it in the first place. And if your building or vessel or towpath is attacked, who to tell and what advice is available around cleansing. Then for courts, we have produced guidance for the magistrates and Crown Court judges. Next one. And as part of the educative process, we work with Jules Fry on these ones for Devon and Cornwall. I think we did these ones for the G7 summit where people were turning up to camp. Very simple language, using pictograms wherever possible. The national reading age has dropped again. I think it's now 8. Unfortunately, Paul, we do have to use some of the the legal terms to actually prove the offence if an offence is committed. This isn't the same in Wales and Scotland, where they've actually reversed the presumption. So the courts ask whether they made any efforts to understand it was a protected site, whereas we have to show that they knew it was a protected site.
Excellent, thanks, Mark. And the next few slides, very much about what can people do through experience. So Heritage Watch, why should people be thinking about that for their historic harbour or potentially where they keep their vessel and working with partners from the built heritage?
Yeah, one of the first calls I made when I started, because obviously I've been responsible for Neighbourhood Watch in Kent Police, and I knew how powerful it was, correctly coordinated. So we negotiated with Neighbourhood Watch, which I think is 45 years old this year as an organisation. So millions of people engaged. Could we actually have a specific heritage element to Neighbourhood Watch? So we've negotiated that collaboration. We're going to be enhancing that over the coming months. We've just reviewed Heritage Watch. And this is not just for owners and managers of protected sites, it's for anybody that wants to get involved. So we've been doing lots of training for community volunteers, and the more eyes and ears we've got out there, Paul, better. And giving them the confidence to reach out, to tell the authorities that they're not happy about something. Sometimes major cases actually are solved through what members of the public have seen.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark. So next slide. And again, showing the kind of things that you can get. So here you'll see on the right, these little credit card sized cards just explain who to tell what to do if you see something suspicious, and you can put down sort of local reference numbers. So again, things like knowing where your mooring is, and knowing your building locations on things like what 3 words at location, very important, because that's used by most police forces and can give them a much more precise location. So things like that. Again, it's all about thinking before it happens. Next slide, please. And again, just examples of the kind of schemes which are taking off around the country and are something that we can help advise you on if you're interested in doing something similar. Next slide. And again, this one with Kent Heritage Watch, just demonstrating that both on land and the wrecks, it's all being sort of pulled together already, hasn't it, Mark?
Yeah, so on this one, what we wanted to do was to engage local communities to understand where their heritage sites and buildings were, and then to work out which ones could actually be subject to crime and antisocial behaviour, so we could actually focus on those first. And by bringing the community in to be part of the process, it wasn't like we were imposing a system on them.
And the next one, please. And there are even schemes in Wiltshire, I think was the first one, Essex now,
Wiltshire,
volunteer
Kent,
riders,
all over the place.
Yeah, and so we've got Heritage Watch volunteers on horses. Why can't we have them on historic vessels?
Yeah,
I think that's
absolutely.
the next thing. Next slide, please. And next slide. So signage again. here.
This is all Jules's stuff.
This is indeed Devon and Cornwall. So lots of police forces have material already or would be interested in working with you. We can perhaps touch on that in a moment when we go to the discussion. Next slide, please. This one, really important example. And again, one of the products that we could get out of this might be a more specialized version, but there are a number of these now. Confident calling. What is that, Mark?
So with the turnover of staff in our police call handling centres, which some forces call contact management centres, the turnover of staff is very high. The number of experienced police officers is very low. So we actually reversed it, Paul, to give victims and people wanting to share intelligence the confidence to call in and what to say. It's not quite scripted, but it's just to help that call handler through to understand that this is something different. It's something special.
Excellent. Next slide, please. Just to show what's in there as well. And again, crime in progress 999. If it's no longer in progress, then 101. Or if you've made that contact in advance, you might well have the telephone number of your community or your heritage crime officer or email, and you might be able to contact them direct.
Yeah, but really important, Paul, that if a crime's in progress, it's 999.
Absolutely.
And if the call handler feels it needs to be downgraded to 101, that's fine. And likewise, if you call 101 and they upgrade it to 999, that's fine as well. If it's happened, I'm finding the online portal very, very useful. So you can actually attach images. And some forces do have a live chat function as well.
Brilliant. Thank you. And now the next few slides, we're just going to be looking at some of the key kind of partnerships and people. So again, you might not have thought of this, but there are a lot of youth heritage youth organisations who are getting involved now, aren't they, in this partnership in valuing their local places, and are exactly the kind of audiences that you're probably engaging with or trying to. So again, Mark, this is a really useful one, isn't it? And we've started to deliver training and certificates to some of these youths now.
Yeah, so if we start off with this one, this is the Youth United Foundation. It's a charitable trust. It looks after 11 uniformed youth groups, so about 1.5 million children and young people. And of course, their adult helpers, it makes that number even bigger. We started to work with police cadets just before the pandemic, but I'm delighted to say that we've now got the entire 11 groups up and running. The next slide, please. And so can't quite see what that is.
It's the Heritage Explorer Home-based Scouts. Yeah.
So this is Home-based Scouts. I did this one as a volunteer with my community archaeology group. So we've been working with the Cubs here. They had an initial briefing, and then last week we went out to the Revolver Saxon Shore Fort, where they had to identify objects and place them on a climate change graphic. Next one, please. And you're quite right, Paul. We will be announcing it formally on Friday, but Warwickshire Police Cadets are the first cadet unit in the country to pass through the Heritage Cadet Challenge. So that means that they actually get a uniform patch, Paul.
Excellent. And again, you know, they're young people with an interest in their local place, and they now have a skill and an awareness in observing what looks out of place and what might be potential harm. So again, it's great, isn't it, to have them engaged?
Yeah, and lots of them don't want to become police officers. They're looking for other things to do. So there's a great opportunity here for securing young volunteers and maybe even people to come and work for you.
Fantastic. Okay, next slide, please, and flick on. So, yeah, Mark, just quickly, heritage crime officers.
Yep. So as I said earlier on, we have at least one heritage crime liaison officer in every force in the United Kingdom, not just England. That's growing all the time. And we've actually now beefed up our training to give it some form of accreditation. And again, for next year, we'll actually be making that even more robust. because the courts are becoming very aggressive. They're looking to find ways to undermine the officers all the time. So if we can actually make their training really robust, we can counter that argument.
Excellent, thank you. And the next slide, please. And click on to the next one. And Mark, this is an opportunity potentially for people, isn't it? So people might not be aware that there are actually opportunities for people with specialist heritage skills and knowledge to work with the police as police support volunteers.
Yes, and as I said earlier on, Deputy Chief Constable Nolan not only holds the heritage portfolio, but she's the national policing lead for police support volunteers. I'm actually a police support volunteer with Kent Police as well. We've got some in Gloucestershire, we've got Heffin and John Berry, but we need more. So if anyone's got any interest, just reach out to us and we'll point you in the right direction.
Brilliant, thank you. Next slide, please. So we're coming to the end of the presentation where we're sort of keen to get thoughts from you, but just to kind of recap from what we've talked about, what are some of the things that you can or could be doing? And I know from the chat that many of you are already doing bits of this, which is fantastic. So obviously making contact with your local policing team. If they don't know you're there, they're not going to be able to help. And we've got lots of examples of archaeological sites, buildings, museums, where we've put them in touch or suggested that to police officers when we train them, that they contact their local historic sites. We've suggested to historic places and managers that they contact the police, and they've built that relationship up. If they know you're there, they'll pop by if they can. And the way to get them in, and Jules Fry will confirm this, I'm sure. But if you can offer them a cup of tea, they'll be round at some point when they're free. If you can offer them biscuits, they'll probably be around more often than you want. But a little goes a very long way. And if you can build that relationship, and with others in the community, building awareness, thinking about heritage watch schemes, all really important. And of course, what we would like now is to get more of a sense from you of what kind of tools and guidance or other training you might find useful going forward in the future, and also to hear about your experiences of, because I know there are a lot of people on the call who have had various experiences of these crimes that we've been talking about. So next slide, please. And this will be provided afterwards, so don't be afraid to reach out to Mark or myself. We're always keen to signpost people on if we don't have the answer. So if you'd like to take it off share, Louis, and back to you, Hannah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Paul and Mark. I mean, that was a really comprehensive overview of the subject. You squeezed a huge amount into an hour and a half. So yeah, thank you very much for taking the time to put that presentation together. You started off by looking at the different types of heritage that exist within the sector, and then really flagging the partnerships that can be achieved by taking a proactive approach. And I've seen some comments in the chat already saying they really like the idea of linking up with the local marine police teams or the heritage crime teams, also the idea of the heritage watch. You also touched briefly on some of the advice and guidance that already exists, produced by Historic England, to help address the problem. And I think we'd all like to get a sense, particularly from the audience, of whether that needs to be a bit more tailored for historic vessels, or whether we can just use the material that's already there. And then you kind of finished with how to report a crime, as well as building just generally awareness of heritage within the local community. I certainly feel I've got a much better understanding of the subject as a whole, but I'm sure that there are points that we'd all like to delve into in a little bit more detail. So we do have about 20 minutes left now, heading for a 2 o'clock finish. So this is really the opportunity for everybody in the audience now to ask any questions of Paul and Mark, to share your own experiences and case studies, or to flag areas of concern. If you would like to speak, please do use the reaction button at the bottom to raise your hands, and I'll just try and work my way through the screen. Or if it's easier, put questions or comments into the chat. Okay, is there anybody who would like to start us off?
There's a couple of questions in the chat, Hannah, about it says Gerard says, is this going to be available to view again? We are going to circulate the slides, aren't we?
Yeah, thank you, Gerald. That's a great question. We are recording the session, so it will be available, and we'll circulate the link afterwards and also put it on the National Historic Ships YouTube channel for anybody that missed it. But Lewis will also be sending around some resources afterwards, and we'll include a kind of slimmed down version of the slides for people to take a look at. So yeah, there'll be lots of material coming around afterwards.
And Ruth is talking about Second World War wrecks in the Far East being completely taken away. She talks about pre-nuclear age steel. I don't think those ones, Paul, were taken because of pre-nuclear age steel, but it was just the steel. But I do believe that there were some vessels that were attacked because they had pre-nuclear lead.
Yeah, and again, I think that question is asking, does that happen around the UK? The answer is it has done, but it doesn't happen on the same scale. But it is an issue worldwide at the moment, but particularly in the Far East. And again, there are developments, particularly in relation to things like the use of satellites for monitoring wreck vessels, which are being carried out by a number of organisations. So there's lots of stuff developing in this area in relation to trying to protect heritage better, but it's the scale of it. It's massive, and a lot of these things, particularly wrecks, they're offshore. So again, people who sail vessels are in a good place to, if they're aware of where these key wrecks are, to be part of that sort of eyes and ears and feedback intelligence.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you for picking up those questions. We've also got a hand up from Georgina Ascroft from Hartlepool. Georgina, do you want to unmute yourself and you can ask the question to Paul or Mark?
So I'm fairly new to this sort of area, and what we found with our historic vessel, which is an on-the-water paddle steamer, which is closed to the public at the moment due to needing significant repair works, is that we've had some, in the warmer months, people accessing the vessel from not the quayside, but from the water itself, including throwing things, getting on board with fishing wire and damaging some of the fixtures on the top deck. So in that sort of instance, what would be the recommended kind of procedure to kind of report that? We're a local authority, so that we could probably fit within those structures, but I'm also slightly separate from a lot of the corporate side of things. So your advice would be very well received.
I'll take that one.
Yeah.
Okay, so you sit within the Cleveland policing area. You sit within the Hartlepool division. The police commander there is Superintendent Al Donahue. And we've been chatting to Al about his neighbourhood team and his police cadets, predicated on the work around the fires that we had last year. So we're actually talking to Al about putting Heritage Watch in across Hartlepool. So if you can drop me a note, we'll sort that one out for you.
Oh, thank you, Mark. Just to say as well, Georgina, if you haven't caught Mark's email or anything like that, we're happy to facilitate on the email afterwards so we can link you up together.
That would be great. Yes, thanks, Hannah. Thanks.
Lovely, thank you. And I've now got a question from Oliver Moxham. Oliver, if you'd like to unmute.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Oliver. I'm a third-year archaeology PhD in heritage studies at Cambridge. Thank you for the talk. It's really interesting to know what's been done to address heritage crime in the UK. My question comes from my work. So I deal with controversial heritage sites in Japan, which are tied with imperial history and are frequently targeted by vandalism, not because of ignorance of the value of the sites, but because of how people identify with its history. And we've seen similar events in the UK where in Bristol, people decided that Edward Colston didn't represent them anymore, and so they tossed his statue in the harbour. I understand your work is very much to do like the immediate act of crime, but are there any efforts made by heritage police members in anticipating attacks on controversial sites and working with the community to find a more civil means of managing discontent with heritage?
Okay, I'll take the policey bit. So part of the intelligence process, Oliver, is to continuously scope for things that we can try and prevent, put mitigation in before things happened. So, for example, when Russia had a special military operation in Ukraine, most people call it a war. It was there going to be discontent about things that were associated with Russia, Belarus, Putin, so that we're able to actually assess the threats, the risks, and the vulnerability there. And during the pandemic, following the death of George Floyd, we had the rise of the BLM campaign. So again, what statues were likely, potentially liable to attack, so we could put mitigation in process.
Yeah, and I think the other side of that is very much back to the prevention, and that's through two things. You can put signage in place, which is always easy. It's a bit like health and safety. Signage is one of the early easy wins that you can put in to explain what it is and why doing something isn't a good idea. But really, it's about trying to help a community to understand and have a discourse and value the fact that whether or not something is controversial, the fact that it's there is the anchor for that discussion and debate. And if you remove history and those physical remains, then you don't have the opportunity to have that debate as easily. But it's very difficult. And where culturally people don't put the same significance on retaining fabric, and that's certainly a case in Japan and parts of the Far East. Culturally, the fabric is less important than the stories and the memory. Then that can be a real challenge. Yeah.
I mean, British history is long but complicated. So the policy of Historic England is to retain and explain as far as we can.
Yeah, great. Thank you both. That was a really good answer. Passing on to Robin Diper now from Hull, please.
Hello, thank you very much for that. That was really interesting. I don't really expect an answer to this one today, but it was just sort of feedback in terms of what would be useful going on. I do think bespoke advice for vessels specifically would be helpful. And I think one factor that I think it makes whether they're privately owned or museum ships particularly vulnerable is how easy sometimes they are to get on board and how tempting they are for some people to get on board, whether that's on a marina side or on a canal or whatever. So it might be there's sort of good practice out there that helps to minimize that, or it might be just part of the challenge with vessels as well. But I think that might be something that applies to a lot of people.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. I think we've definitely, I mean, Paul touched very briefly on some of the unique characteristics of historic vessels. Most of us in the audience are aware of those, and I think having something a bit more tailored could make it a lot easier to apply some of the principles we've talked about today. So it's definitely something that we'll be chatting more to Paul and Mark about, and seeing if there's some documents we can pull together.
Definitely.
Okay, any other questions for Paul and Mark? There's one that's come up with me, which is the fact that we are effectively the mobile heritage sector. So obviously we've talked quite a lot about vessels that are, static or moored ashore or a part of a museum setting, for example, but we also have a lot of operational historic vessels on the register. So when you've got a historic vessel that's moving from place to place, it can be a little bit more difficult to build local partnerships. And I just wondered if Mark or Paul, you had any advice for owners in that position.
Yeah, I'll take that one initially. So I think That's a really good point. But the way to approach it is to think about where you have an operational vessel, and I suppose at one extreme end of the spectrum is the Waverley, which travels a lot, tours a lot, and then lots of other vessels are doing that to a lesser degree. You'll nearly always have key locations, so there'll be a home base, or there'll be where you tend to go for repair. There might be places that you visit on a regular basis, and it's finding out, do they already have a heritage watch? Is it a heritage harbour site? So is there something that you can already tap into?
Yeah.
It's really that, like you would if you're going on holiday and planning, where you're going to go and see. Do a bit of research about the places that you regularly go to, build your partnerships there. And again, thinking about if you're traveling a particular route or journey, which marine police areas are you going to go through? So again, let them know. One of the things we say to archaeologists is, if you're doing an archaeological excavation somewhere, and they will have a different excavation depending on development, from time to time, tell the local police that between June and August you'll be on a particular site doing an excavation. And I'll call in Jules Fry in a moment, because I'm sure he, as many of our other police colleagues, are very keen to get out and see those places. And the same with the marine units. If they know that there's going to be a historic vessel going through their waters at a particular time, and they're not actively engaged on something else, they will, I'm sure, want to sort of pop by and say hello, have a look, make contact, but certainly keep an eye out for you. So I think it's about being proactive and looking for where are the opportunities, not to have to reinvent it, but to get into what's already there and just make other people aware. But Jules, perhaps you'd like to just sort of say a bit around that, but just more generally, as from your perspective, to people about how to engage with you and colleagues.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yeah, that's really important. I mean, this is all about communication. Firstly, to say that if we don't know something's wrong, then we can't help you fix it. So I would say that don't think because you might be a vessel floating offshore or moored somewhere that you're any less significance than a building or a heritage site on land. So please report everything is the first message. Then we can actually be aware where the issues are, perhaps start mapping things like we are down in Devon and Cornwall, and there will be support that we can offer you or signpost to you. So that's absolutely crucial. Devastated to see the update in the chat that a historic lifeboat was put to the point you couldn't restore it because of theft from it. So that's the classic sort of thing that we need to know about. I think in terms of interacting with the police, it was already covered really well by Mark. Sending a message on the online portals asking for contact. Ideally, I would suggest going through your rural crime team. They will probably be the ones that are best linked to the dive team and can facilitate sort of link ups there. And in terms of what we can do with the dive team, certainly as far as Devon and Cornwall are concerned, they're extremely proactive. I was speaking to them quite frequently last week. We've had some issues on a protected wreck down our way. And to be honest, they're all over it. They absolutely love this heritage stuff, as well as their core business that they're dealing with day to day. So don't think that they're an entity that you can't access or reach out to. You can. It's just finding the right officer to be the conduit. So if you draw a blank, come back to Paul or Mark, and they can come to me, and we can link you up
That's
another
funny,
way.
because I was going to say make contact with Jules Fry.
I'll tell you what, I'll put my email in the chat, then everybody's got it. Thanks, Mark. But I'll be delighted to be the conduit, because this is so important. I mean, I'm the operational lead, tactical operational lead for Birdie around our protected wrecks, but these vessels are still in existence. So they're vitally important to protect and defend. And I'm delighted that so many people are still doing it. So where we can support you, we absolutely will.
Oh,
Thanks, Jules.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming in there, Jules. It's really lovely to hear that perspective and how approachable the Marine Police are, etc. So thank you for coming in. We also have another question from Phil Stevens, please. Phil, if you'd like to unmute.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. Yeah, and thanks to Paul and Mark. That was a really good presentation. I think I'd just like to reiterate what you were saying about partnerships. I mean, I'm from Steamship Shieldhall, which is one of the larger vessels on the National Historic Fleet, which gives us some advantages, but it also gives us some disadvantages. But I think when it comes to partnerships, what we've tried to do is build up a partnership with all of the emergency services in the Southampton region and the Metropolitan Police, believe it or not, for counter-terrorism.
Yeah,
and we give the vessel over for them to do their training. Now that helps us build up a lot of contacts within all of the emergency services. So if something is going to go wrong, they do know the vessel. They've been on it so many times, especially the fire brigade who do rescues out of the holds and that kind of thing. But also, I think building partnerships with the any industry or any sort of leisure facilities around your vessel if it's on the water. So we're a big ship. We're in a big dock in Southampton, so we are well protected by Associated British Ports and DP World's security systems on the land side. But on the water side, then it's partnerships with the harbour master, for instance. So every time he's going up and down the water, he's just keeping an eye on the vessel. And opposite where the vessel's moored is a private sailing club. They've got CCTV. They've got people on the water looking across the water at our ship all the time. And so we've built a relationship with them. So if they see anything untoward going on from the water on our vessel, they give us a shout. So I'm just trying to reiterate that the partnerships are not only with the emergency services, but it's the community around your vessel to help protect it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
thank you, Phil. That's a really good case study.
Yeah, and I think what Phil's described there, Hannah, is we just had this review done of Heritage Watch, and one of the things that's shining out through the recommendations is this idea of a hub, something in a community that is well known, cherished, in many cases beloved, because so many people have known it for such a long time. So the ability to have the Heritage Watch element where people are saying, what's this? How do I get involved? Is really important.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. As I say, I think Shieldhall's a great example of the partnerships they've built up, as Phil said. But also our Heritage Harbours scheme, which Paul touched on earlier, is another really great way to build those partnerships in the local community and to bring a whole load of stakeholders together who kind of got a vested interest in everything that's happening on the water and the maritime buildings around. So yes, definite food for thought there. Okay, well, we're coming to the end of the session now, so I think I'm going to bring the general discussion and the Q&A to an end. But if people do have questions that they haven't asked, as Mark and Paul have already said, they're very happy to be contacted. So either directly through the emails that they put up on the screen earlier or by an email to National Historic Ships, we'll be very happy to facilitate and connect you so you can get any queries answered after today or make those introductions with the local Heritage Watch and Marine Police teams. I'd now like to just say a huge thank you to Paul and Mark. You've been brilliant speakers. Thank you for taking part today for a great presentation. There's been lots of nice comments coming in on the chat, so I think everybody's enjoyed it as much as I have. And I know that we've all benefited hugely from your knowledge and experience that you've shared. So thank you for taking the time to deliver the session. I'd also like to say a quick thank you to Lewis from my team for handling the technology today. Thank you very much, Lewis, and for picking up on the slides to make it all run smoothly. And also, of course, a thank you to the audience. You've all been great. We've loved your contributions on the chat and the really intelligent questions that you've come over with. I think it's broadened the scope of the topic even further. And so, as we mentioned earlier, we'll definitely be having a think about any sort of tailored guidance that we can put out on this subject for historic vessel owners. We'll also be sending around a short feedback survey, and we'd be really grateful if you would complete that and send it in to us just to let us know how you found the session and any thoughts or suggestions that come to you for follow-ons. And finally, Lewis will be circulating that link of resources. That's just to provide some further support on the topics we've discussed today. So look out for that in your inbox. That will take you through to a summary presentation and a lot of the information that Paul and Mark have provided. But for now, that's everything for today. So just remains to say thank you all again for joining. I hope that you've enjoyed the webinar. I certainly feel like I've learned a lot in the last 2 hours. And I hope you have a very good and hopefully a cool afternoon. Thank you all for coming. Bye-bye.